Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I am delighted to welcome a very accomplished entrepreneur from the world of FinTech from New Delhi, India, Mr. Kunal Aggarwal. Kunal, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me over, Ashutosh.
Kunal is the founder and chief executive officer of Credflow, which is a revolutionary fintech based startup offering a SaaS based cash flow management software. He was also awarded as the Forbes 30 under 30. So, Kunal, what was the inspiration to create Credflow and how does it address the cash flow challenges faced by SMEs?
Sure. So a little bit on my personal background because that is highly correlated to what we are building here at Credflow.
Absolutely.
So I've been born and brought up in Delhi. I belong to a family of entrepreneurs, essentially a family of SMEs.
Mm-hmm.
So my father, my uncles have all been running SMEs for the last, whatever, 30, 40 years, been primarily into manufacturing and distribution.
Right.
So our dinner conversations used to be primarily around the challenges faced by their businesses. So I always used to wonder, how can I use technology to solve some of these problems? With that aim in mind, eventual aim was to basically build my own business. I got into IT Delhi, did multiple things around entrepreneurship there as well. But immediately after college, I basically started a B2B aggregation platform called Robbel, wherein we were supplying raw materials to cosmetic and pharma manufacturers. There I realized how large the problem statement around cash flow management is, and why working capital becomes the biggest rate determining step for these businesses, right? That is what essentially becomes their whole problem, that why they're not able to grow. So we were essentially we had scaled up to about 20 crores in revenue in our first year itself. But the larger problem we were always facing was that we used to get our payments from our customers in 60 days, 90 days, against a credit period of 30 to 60 days, right? So the payments were delayed. So that was one problem that I saw. Second was because we used to pay our vendors in a smaller credit cycle or in advance. So whatever capital we had, all of it was deployed as in the market as working capital. I had tried to tie up with a lot of lenders back then to get our invoices financed against the sales done on the platform. Now that is where I realized that cash flow based financing as a concept is still sort of alien to Indians, right? It is just coming into India around 2020s when I'm talking about 2019. And that is where it hit me that why can we not combine these two? So basically
Right.
build a platform to help businesses manage their collections, and on top of it build a layer of financial services. So this is how the journey around Credflow began.
How amazing. How
Uh,
amazing.
from
Sorry.
there, we've scaled very well. As a product, what we do is we have a SaaS that helps these businesses automate their workflows around payment collections. Uh, Basically, send reminders to customers, get visibility on their own receivables, give them analytic structure to the business promoter, and on top of it, we're basically doing lending using the data that we have.
Fascinating. And how would you say Credflow differentiates itself from so many other cash flow management solutions available?
Um, so I would say that the core differentiation itself comes from the fact that we are operating in a segment wherein there are very few players. So SME, as one word, is a very wrong term to use, right? Because there are multiple different segments within this, right? So
Absolutely.
how I look at it is, so businesses which are very small, say below 40 lakhs in revenue, which are sort of non-GST registered businesses, more like mom and pop stores that we see around ourselves. So for them, cash flow management is basically getting the payments from their B2C customers who bought from them on credit, right? So a platform like Khata Book, etc., solves the problem for them. Now, one layer above that is basically those retail stores which have just graduated from a non-GST to a GST businesses few years back, and they're basically migrating from a paper-led economy, from bill book-led economy to a digitized economy, wherein they're
Right.
recording those invoices on a app or on a platform, and they basically need to file those with the GST department. So that is where there are few players like Vyapar, there are players like Flowbase which are operating, which are essentially solving the problem of accounting for those businesses. Now, one layer above that is basically the segment that we operate in, which is the businesses in the revenue of 1 crore to 100 crores.
Hmm.
So these are primarily B2B businesses,
Right.
essentially manufacturer, distributors, and traders. So for them, the problem is very different. They've already been, managing their accounting on a platform like Tally or Busy in a digitized way. They
Hmm.
primarily have an in-house accountant, or they have a sort of a part-time accountant who comes three, 4 times a week or
Hmm.
2 times a week.
Hmm.
Uh, the problem for them is that the finances in terms of their accounting is a black box. So
Hmm.
they don't understand exactly what is happening in their tally, right? The
Hmm.
business owner, and even the say some of these people around them, like a say a salesperson who also has to follow up for their payments.
Hmm.
uh, what our platform does is it basically builds a layer on top of their existing accounting solution. It
Hmm.
integrates with that, fetches all the data from there, and gives the business owner a very real-time picture on their mobile app itself. So whenever they're on the go, they can see who owes them how much. They can send them a reminder. They can automate those reminders to customers. They can automatically share invoices to the customers. And that is where the problem gets solved for this segment. So there are hardly any players
Yeah.
in this segment that we're operating
Oh,
in.
amazing. Thank you. Your platform also helps businesses to manage and forecast their cash flow more effectively. Can you explain this to me or us with an example?
Sure, sure. So I'll give you one problem I myself faced, right? We were essentially, so in a way, we were operating as an SME in my previous business, right?
Hmm.
Where we were supplying chemicals and APIs to cosmetic manufacturers.
Hmm.
Now, the problem we always used to face was that in some days we were cash surplus, and in some days we were cash deficit. And vendors on those cash deficit days, vendors used to chase us for payments. And in those cash surplus days, the money was just lying in our current account.
Hmm.
Now, why that was a problem was that we ourselves didn't have a proper system in place wherein we could exactly plan out which payments are going to come to me when, so that I can plan my treasury accordingly. And I mean, treasury is a very fancy word to use for this, but essentially, how will I pay my vendors on what dates is what the problem statement is, right?
Hmm.
um, that is what we give them a view on, right? Wherein uh, today they can forecast 2 months in advance what payments they're going to receive in which week, right? Basis the past behavior of the customer, basis how they've historically paid, basis if they pay on specific dates or something. All of that data combines and basically gives them a
Hmm.
projection
Hmm.
that this is where they're going to be cash surplus and this is where they're going to be cash deficit. So that in a cash surplus week you can probably invest that money into a overnight fund or a money market
Hmm.
wherein you can get some ROI which you don't get on a current account.
Hmm.
And cash deficit week you can plan your credit lines accordingly, right? You can either negotiate with your vendors in advance so that you get a better pricing as well as a longer credit period,
Hmm.
or you can basically use, say for example, we offer a credit line to pay your vendors, right? It's a AP financing product that we have. Now you can use our credit line to pay your vendors. So similarly, I mean, irrespective of us, you either might have a overdraft line from your bank. So you
Right.
can plan that I need to have this much amount that I can use from my overdraft account to pay my vendors when I'm
Hmm.
deficit.
Well said. Thank you. And you also, when I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation with you, you also say that you support or educate SMEs so that they are better able to understand and manage their cash flow.
Mhm.
Tell me, how do you do this and what is the kind of support you provide?
So two, three things. One, basically, one of the most biggest problem statement is when someone comes and asks you for credit in a trade, right?
Hmm.
Or like say, if you're a banker and NBFC, you have a whole gamut of data to underwrite the customer upon, right?
Hmm.
As an SME, you don't have access to any sort of a data on whether how credit worthy that customer is, right?
Right.
What might you might end up in a situation is
Hmm.
either you might not give them any credit or you and lose that sale,
Hmm.
or you might end up giving selling to someone on credit who might not repay back, right?
Hmm.
And that's a very big problem statement we've seen in the
Hmm.
industry.
Hmm.
So how we solve that is because we have almost half of India's GST businesses who have transacted with our users. So on
Hmm.
credit, for example, we have 1.5 lakh businesses who've integrated their accounting software with us, and they in turn have done transaction with about 5 million businesses, almost
Hmm.
half of the GST registered businesses. So those transactions we've rated and given sort of a trade rating to every business, right? In almost how, for example, CIBIL does for financial transactions for financial liability, we've done that for trade liabilities. And you can basically input anyone's GST number on our app. So we've launched another app called KuberX for that, wherein you can input their GST number and understand how credit worthy that customer is, whether they repay on time or not, in how many days do they pay their vendors, what's their
Mm,
turnover, all those metrics, so that you can take a more informed decision. So that is
mm,
one. Second, apart from this, we also do certain regular webinars to educate the customers on how to better manage their cash flows and
mm,
overall business, right? So we hold those every 1 week or 2 week, so that the SMEs can actually uh, and we sort of give out a proper model or a financial model, so that they can actually use those tools that we provide so more effectively.
mm.
So these are some of the things that we
Very
take.
interesting. Very interesting. You also talk about leveraging data analytics to provide more personalized solutions.
Right.
Tell me more about this.
So two, three things. One, basically, as I said, right, we give a cash flow calendar, projected cash flow calendar to every business, so that they can exactly know how their own cash flows are going to look in future.
Right.
And accordingly, on top of it, we basically pitch personalized sort of credit lines to them, right? So, for
Mm,
example, in a certain week, you're going to be cash deficit of 5 lakh rupees. So you have a ready line of 7 lakh rupees that you can just use by clicking couple of buttons and doing your KYC.
mm,
And so more like a pre-approved offer basis your existing data, right? So that
mm,
is what we look at. We use their data, right? Second is this other product that I talked about, which is a trade score for every business, right? Again, using a lot of data, we have created this score. So we have about 50 parameters that are basically going into that model to
mm,
basically come up with everyone's trade score.
mm,
So that is another piece. Third is basically we also track how they're using the app, and accordingly that the dashboard is also customized basis and personalized basis their use case, right?
mm.
Based on their size of the business. So I mean, these are three, four use cases that where we look
Very
at a lot of
interesting. Very interesting. And I also found that, Credflow integrates very well with Tally and
data.
Busy. Uh, what went into building this integration backward and forward, and how are businesses benefiting from this?
So basically, I'll answer the first question first, which is basically how that integration happened. So it was I would say it was not an easy thing. Basically, the challenge we faced was essentially Tally has an open source language called TDL built on top of their platform,
Mm,
on which you can basically build plugins. And similarly, Busy has something else. I don't remember the exact term for that.
mm,
Uh, so we leverage that, but there was no documentation available anywhere across on the internet to how to use that for our platform.
mm,
So it took us a lot of reverse engineering, a lot of engineering to and lot of hits and tries to
mm,
actually do that integration seamlessly, right? um, and that's why that's one challenge that a lot of other platforms also face. So what we've also now done is basically created an open API on top of our platform that anyone can consume our APIs and integrate directly with television using our APIs, right? So
mm,
that's one solution we have.
mm,
But more importantly, how these businesses benefit from this integration is we realized very, very early on that our platform cannot be the data entry source, right? Because the accountants are so accustomed, right? They almost have a muscle memory on Tally, right? They've been using it for 25 years. They basically,
correct.
the basic education itself happens on Tally, right? So they don't want to change that, and it makes no sense to at all to make them change their accounting platform, right?
Right.
That's why
Right.
these platforms are so
Mm,
sticky. So what we've done is we've once that seamless integration happens, they don't need to input any data on our platform. It gets auto fetched from there, so
mm,
that their work starts from that just clicking a button, and they can see their actual sync data on our mobile and web. So
right.
that's how that integration plays out. So for these businesses.
Very interesting. Kunal, the next few questions are for you as an entrepreneur, and less on Credflow.
Okay.
Today, Credflow is a well known brand, 150,000 customers, and growing very rapidly. Tell me more about what were some of the challenges that you faced while you were bootstrapping Credflow, and how did you overcome some of these challenges?
So I would say the first and primary challenge that I faced was that I was a solo founder,
Hmm.
and being a non-tech founder, right? Essentially, building a tech business.
Hmm.
Uh, so I obviously understand technology. I obviously understand how products are built, but I don't do coding, right? So the
Hmm.
first and primary challenge was to uh, build the right team who could build the product out, and
Hmm.
it took a lot of time, right?
Hmm.
Essentially, it took a lot of hits and tries. We also did not have the capital, right? So because it was bootstrapped, I was using my own savings from my previous venture and a little bit
Hmm.
of money from my family. So we had to be very, very frugal. So getting an engineer who was also at a very, very low cost, but who also could build out a
Correct.
something like this, which takes a lot of hits and tries. So
Hmm.
that was the one biggest challenge. Second, obviously being a solo founder, you have to manage lot of things. um, Later on, when you want to scale, you need additional external funding. So
Hmm.
while doing that, I mean, obviously investors also look at you negatively when you're a solo founder. So they need even more proof from you as a entrepreneur that you can basically build it in this industry.
Right.
Third, being a non finance guy, right? Not having spent, I mean, essentially lending is a business wherein if you have gray hairs, you are obviously looked at more
Correct.
uh, better than someone
Hmm.
who's very
Hmm.
young. I was hardly 24, 25 when I started Credflow. So that was even bigger of a problem. So I mean, it took us a lot of time to actually
Hmm.
convince
Hmm.
the early investors to also invest in. So
Very
that was
interesting.
probably
And
that.
your experience with Robbel, how did that influence the development and direction of Credflow?
I think the entire product direction came from that. The entire understanding on how Credflow eventually, as a business, would scale also came from that, right? Because I had gotten my hands dirty, right? Gotten my hands burned in the similar sort of problem statements, right? Because
Hmm.
we used to face a lot of challenges around our own collections. We used to face a lot of challenges partnering with lenders and
Hmm.
get financing for our, uh, I mean, for us to scale up. So this was a problem statement that I resonated with very, very deeply. And
Hmm.
also all the problems that we used to face are something which is very easily transferable to almost every SME which is in the B2B space. So
Hmm.
these insights essentially allowed us to build a product from day one without having to iterate a lot, right? I mean, I would say that the first version of the product that we built out and the first, I mean, design draft that we actually made even before building the product, um, that essentially proved very much product market fit
Right.
uh, when we launched it.
Very interesting. So, from a situation where you were bootstrapping Credflow, you obviously raised money. What strategies did you employ to secure funding? And what advice would you give to other startups looking for investment?
I think the good thing that happened with us was that we were never in a hurry to raise money. We were essentially, so I think very early on we had realized that at a small scale we can be profitable very early on, right?
Hmm.
We started getting in the cash flows. We got the product market fit early. So I am a very big believer of not raising capital before your PMF, right?
Hmm.
Because as soon as you raise external capital, there are spotlight on you. Do you have the pressure from to basically give an ROI to investors, right?
Correct.
um, Unlike when you are basically bootstrapped, it's your own money, so
Hmm.
uh, you can take more time. That's
Correct.
all I would say, right?
Correct.
So you can essentially take that time to get your piece right, and capital should act as a fuel on how you can multiply that same 100x, right? It should not be, you should not use capital to figure out what to do, right? You should use the capital to fuel the growth, right? So
Hmm.
that is how I look at capital,
Hmm.
and that is how every entrepreneur should look at capital. I am a very strong believer of, right? So
Hmm.
essentially get your early product right, start generating certain cash flows, get to a situation wherein at least you have a path to profitability, and then raise
Hmm.
capital to scale up.
Very
So that
interesting.
is uh,
Very interesting. Thank you. So I have time for two more questions for you. As you look ahead, what are some of the big challenges you think you are may face in the current fintech landscape, and how do you plan to address these?
So, I mean, obviously, fintech is a hard space given that it's a highly regulated one, and even
Correct.
more so in the recent years, wherein RBI has also, I mean, done a lot of changes in regulations, a lot of
Mm,
changes happening almost every month or so. So, I think the right way to navigate it is one, basically get to the right licenses as soon as possible.
mm,
So, probably that is one challenge that we need to solve for, get our
mm,
own NBFC license in place as soon as possible.
mm,
Second would be that as these regulations change, keeping a pace with them, right, and not be on the wrong side of these compliances,
mm.
because they can actually kill your business. We've already seen
Correct.
recently large lenders like DMI Finance and Navi getting their disbursals stopped
Mm,
because of certain reasons. Paytm
mm.
was also hit very
Yeah.
bad. Even very, very large lenders have been hit very badly because of.
Mm, mm. Wonderful. And my last question to you, what trends do you foresee in the entire fintech industry, especially when it comes to cash flow management for SMEs?
I think one big tailwind that happened for us was COVID. A
Mhm.
lot of these SMEs essentially digitized, and that is a trend that I don't see reversing. It will actually accelerate only going forward
Correct.
with
Mm,
the digitization of the economy, and with a lot of government push as well in terms of new compliance changes they keep on bringing.
mm,
For example, they recently brought in, I mean, e-invoicing and made it mandatory for any business above 5 CR, and they will eventually lower the bar for even 2
mm,
crore businesses. So I think for cash flow management, essentially, the first and starting point is that your accounting should be digitized,
mm.
and which is happening very rapidly for these
Right.
businesses. um, Second is basically education with respect to these business owners on how to manage their cash flows effectively, what all avenues they could explore to basically get additional capital, what all avenues they have to manage their existing money. So that is another trend that I see going forward, which will accelerate. Thirdly, I mean, adoption of technology as it increases, it will also lead to a lot of adoption of, SaaS, right? And with adoption of SaaS in SMEs, because SMEs have technically been, historically been technical laggards, right? They've
Mm,
not adopted technology very
right.
well. So as that digitization increases,
Mm,
overall, adoption of SaaS will increase, which will lead to
mm.
obviously increase in adoption of cash flow solutions.
Great response. And on that note, Kunal, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me. I love the way you explained so simply how being from a business family, sitting around the dining table, talking business, and at such a young age, you said, "Let me find a solution that can help," and you came up with Credflow. That it's quite an amazing story. Thank you for speaking to me about Credflow, about how you are supporting so many SMEs to manage and forecast their cash flows. Thank you also for talking to me about how you and your team helps educate and support these SMEs and how you help leverage their own data. Finally, thank you for talking to me about some of the challenges you faced in bootstrapping, and great advice that raise money only when you are known. Don't be in a hurry because sometimes being in the spotlight can tend to create more problems than you can possibly anticipate. And finally, thank you for your own perspectives and where you see the entire industry heading. Thank you for
Thank you.
speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.